Good afternoon, everyone. Perhaps it's morning. Whatever time of the day it is, it's only where we're at. And that's the bigger picture of our world, the wonderful place we live, which seems to be shifting in varying ways and converging into what might be something that we want to pay a bit more detailed attention to. Now, I've brought up subjects over time regarding weather, and this isn't going to be one of them, but we've definitely had a lot more wind and a lot more varying temperatures occurring in our country here in Australia. We're not a small country, but to be honest, there's weather extremes going off everywhere. So if we want to take a look at why these extremes are going on, it might be worthwhile paying attention to some other videos that we're going to be bringing up soon. But we're not talking about the weather today. We're talking about whether or not we're going to survive the onslaught of global economic circumstances. And this makes me question in a number of ways as to how the convergence of circumstances are occurring, and why we're able to get, essentially many nations are increasing their budgets for military spending. So they don't normally do that sort of stuff unless there's an intention to use it. In fact, when we take a look at government policies that are brought in, it's because they plan on implementing them. So throughout the years, that's where we've been witnessing all numbers of false flags occurring around voting dates, whether it be wherever in the world. And they were always broadcast on my radio shows back in the days that I had them, the decades that I had them. And this was an intention to just bring a level of awareness as to what the distractions are that occur in our information being fed to us. And the feeding of things is a certain aspect of consideration too, because essential prices, or prices of essentials, are what keep going up. So we're going to expect, even though the price of fuel here in Australia hasn't dropped, while the price of oil per barrel has by probably 30%, we're going to see that increasing over the next few months, and that's going to just pump up prices from an already high place. Now, we all got used to lack of travelling and mobility in regards to the situation, sebaceous sickness a few years ago, and that may well occur again, but beyond the discussions I've been having in relation to how we'll be limited from a weather perspective, and that's whether roads are cut off or simply the places that we want to go to we don't really want to get to anymore. That could also play a considerable problem in getting the food to us. That would be something we should be considering. My intention in alerting people in regards to this is that food has always been one thing that we cannot do without, and so it should be the primary cause for concern and the primary cost towards our health and longitude in relation to life itself. But economically speaking, we're now having news channels discuss the idea that people might have to sell their houses because they cannot afford the interest rates of them. And that's a concern for us all. Here! Let's get my well-behaved dog to return from her being a marima around the property. Good girl. So what are we looking at now? obviously there are concerns in regards to interest rates for everyone. And little video I put up the other day while I was scouring country for some of the gold and shiny stuff was in relation to what interest rates need to get to before it's going to start curbing inflation, which is a central bank intention. And they're just not going to discuss this in absolute truth until the point when they end up taking it too far that we have no ability to undo what has been done, which is ultimately pretty significant debts. And debt is going to be the death of the middle class. So the consequences of that could end up becoming universal basic incomes, and then what are you going to have to do for that? So look, it just goes on and on and on, and I don't want to go too far down into any individual subject right now, because really you're not going to want to listen to me for an hour. But there is an intention for governments to increase their spending on military. A third of the Russian budget's going on it. Japan just announced that they're going to add $500 billion to their, or maybe 300 billion US, I think, in regards to fears in relation to China. North Korea is about to test a nuclear missile. Circumstances are that, circumstances could be that things around the world are going to be aiming to take away ammunition simply by the availability being consumed by what would be nations and their military impacts. Not to mention certain crises that are circumstantial, one of them just recently here in Australia. Convenient as it might be, an opportunity to engage new laws, a bit like our Port Arthur massacre in the mid-90s, something which changed the Australian gun laws forever. And these are concerns that obviously will be raised at a point in time when it's obviously going to be too late for anyone to do anything about it. Personally, I think if you've got a gun or a rifle of some kind, you'd better have a justifiable use for it, such as agricultural circumstances. But we know that there are many that just like the fuel on the fire. My hopes are that there's an opportunity for people to recognise in various ways that as there are wars and rumours of wars, that this could also be seen as biblical texts. And that's a concern in regards to, the outcomes of the texts themselves. And how are we going to navigate such things? So underground seems to be the subject matter that a lot of nations on the edges of these regions are discussing at the moment. And that could become rather handy in relation to some of the volcanic activity that's been continuously occurring and the earthquake activity around regions that are of concerns for supervolcanoes and rings of fire and the like. So what is it that is creating the allowance for everything in this world to be so superficially skeptical and, questionable at this junction? And I'm of the belief that there's a problem lying ahead that many people won't recognise until it is way too late. And not being a fearmonger, because I'm more aware that I'm an apocalyptic optimist instead. But with the world so broken, Western society so, I don't know, checked out, naive. And the BRICS nations, a new economic faction that has been discussed by me since the late 2000s as they were developing, are likely to bring a lot of concern to the economies of Western regions, just simply due to the fact that they have about 5 or 6 times the population that will be subject to relying on that particular income, currency and commodity market as the arrogance of Western nations falls over in a wake of disbelief as to how they actually got there. So my hopes are that people will engage in subject matter like this, raise questions in the comments and interact in a way that is aiming for a sense of change. But when there is change, it can often be a little bit painful. And how will that painful translate? Well, economically, socially, environmentally are some of the factors. And where are we going to find our happiness in relation to the opportunities? And where are we going to find the potential for coping mechanisms? And this is some of the things that we'd like to be able to offer you from this channel. As far as the sustainability of one's life goes, it requires a sustainability of our intentions, designed by those that have actually existed in it, as opposed to the influences of today that seem to just pretty much sit in front of a screen and tell you what the news channels have already spouted out, as if their listeners are too naive or have no idea as to where that information comes from. But let me just mention that as far as the forecasting goes, none of these influences really have anything to say other than when it's too late. And it takes a certain level of, balls on the individual to be able to discuss the subject matter that no one wants to be heard. For instance, that they're all going to own nothing and not be happy, because that's not the story you're being told. There's no happiness in having everything that you dream of taken away from you. So how is the economy going to allow you to engage in that? First of all, we're going to start offering how to survive the concept of what is going to be global depression. And I'm not talking just on the mental scale, because that will be something that will be a factor. But economically is what's going to trigger it. Environmentally is what's going to reinforce it. Socially is what's going to aggravate it. And our opportunity to engage in a sense of security beyond that is subject to the opportunity of seeing it a little bit before everybody else. So stay tuned to the world that we offer you if that's something that you wish to continue participating in. There are ways, but it requires you to respond in a time where you're not purchasing the possibilities of getting out of it, getting out of debt at the lowest price available, which obviously, to a degree, people think that it might already be the bottoms at the moment. However, we're far from it. So, I think I'll leave it there for now. There's an opportunity for us all, but we have to take it. And if we're not going to, then I wouldn't expect too much on the other side. With plenty of love, respect, and, proper influential aspects, we sign out. Bless up.